Welcome to another version of Coming Together. We've been doing this for a year now, and I'm David Futransky. I am the Senior Director of Institutional Advancement at Evanston Township High School, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this month's version. I'm also a member of the class of 1969 and work with our Alumni Association and a few other things around the district. Coming together this month is about getting us into the holiday spirit. This is not a how-to, but more of what about version, and it's going to talk about the spirits industry. We have 5 alumni who are joining us today. Chastity Cooper is going to be our moderator and host. Chastity is a journalist who works in the beverage industry and reporting on wine. Rodney Williams is one of our distinguished alumni. Rodney is the president of Belvedere Vodka, and he'll be talking from the viewpoint of the spirits industry. We have Marquita Levy, who's a sommelier and brings experience from the wine industry. And then we have 2 people from the brewing industry. We have Josh Gilbert from Temperance Brewery in Evanston, and we have a brewmaster, Rachel Gashaido, who's with us from Los Angeles. So we have a very exciting talk coming up, and I hope you'll enjoy listening to it.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be moderating such a special conversation. My name is Chastity Cooper. I am a proud graduate of the ETHS class of 2007. And today we're going to be talking about what it's like to work in the beverage industry. And of course, many of us who are watching this are over the age of 21, but for the sake that some current wild kids will be tuning into this conversation, we want to encourage you all to not drink until you are 21. Just keep that in mind. This is definitely a full conversation where you're going to get a lot of insight about the beer, wine, and spirits industry, but we are not encouraging underage drinking. So just keep that in mind as we're moving forward. As I said, I'm a proud grad of the 2007 class. And for me, being in the beverage industry, I'm a wine writer, and it's so awesome to be able to tell so many stories of those who are really just creating incredible products for us to enjoy as adults, but also paving some really cool trails in the industry and making some incredible change. So I'm going to introduce my esteemed panelists today, starting with Marquita Levy. She's a class of 1985. She's a seasoned sommelier and wine educator. Marquita also serves, this is a new position, as the head sommelier of the Crown Club at the Barclays Center, where the Brooklyn Nets play in Brooklyn, New York. Marquita, so happy to have you here. Next is Josh Gilbert, class of 91. He's the owner of Evanston's first microbrewery, Temperance Beer Company, and an architecture by trade. Josh started his hand at home brewing as a hobby and soon opened Temperance in 2013 while still architecting. And today, Temperance Beer Company is available across all of the Chicagoland area, so you can pop into Jewel and Benny's and other cool places to pick up the beer. Next is Rodney Williams. He is a class of 1979, and he is the president and CEO of Belvedere Vodka, which is a division of LVMH that is Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, and Belvedere is the world's first luxury vodka. And as the global head of Belvedere, he and his team are responsible for the growth and recognition of the brand. Over the last year, Rodney is responsible for establishing an initiative that has enabled Belvedere's production to become 100% energy carbon neutral and will eliminate 95% of carbon dioxide by mid-2022. That's awesome. And last but not least, Rachel Gashaido. She's a class of 2011 alumna, and she's the brewmaster at Irwindale Brewyard, a City and Pabst brewing company merger. Rachel is responsible for all brewing and batching operations, and she also ensures the manufacturing of consistent products through recipe management, process optimization, and quality control measures. And she's also currently working on leading process design efforts for the recently acquired Pabst Brewery. You all are creating some very amazing trails in each of your industries. And I'm super, super thankful to be speaking with you all today. And so to kind of kick off our conversation, this is an ETHS alumni chat. So I'd be remiss if I did not ask you all a question about your Evanston experience. So take a moment and think back on your career at Evanston Township. And if you could offer, one or two things that allowed you to really cement your footsteps forward into the industry that you're in today. That could be an academic course, maybe an extracurricular activity. And so, Marquita, I'll have you kick it off. Was there something that you can remember about your ETHS experience that you can tie back to or tie to your current work as a sommelier?
First, I am a proud graduate from the 1985 class. And also, just as a historical note, one of my graduation presents from high school from my mom was a Brother 2000 typewriter. So all you young people, please be thankful for all this Google and Wikipedia, and you just tap the phone and it pays for things. You can watch movies 24/7 and Netflix. Just be so grateful. Okay, so besides that, but there are a couple things that are so important about my ETHS experience. Freshman year, two very fantastic things happened to me. First of all, my humanities honors class. That combination of English and social studies back to back, history and writing and learning in that particular way completely informed both my college education, and I go back to it every time I think about wine, because wine is, of course, a contextual and historical experience. Also, I was a member, I auditioned for YAMO my freshman year, and so I was a member of YAMO all of college, all of high school. That is an important part of my high school life. I was in ASOND my junior and senior year. I was in the orchestra. I was the third viola. There were 3 violas. So that tells you about, I was in the bell choir. So basically I was at ETHS from 7 a.m. in the morning until 7 p.m. at night. My senior year, I got an attendance award, which is impossible as a senior. So on senior ditch day, I had the first 2 periods free. So those are my ditch periods. Also, my European AP class is the reason why I'm getting through all of this wine study, all of the French, Spanish class. It is so important when you're working in fine dining to understand Romance languages, to understand the French, the Spanish, the Italian, and get some German in you. So actually ETHS is the reason why I'm here in the wine world.
Thank you. Josh, what about you?
I would say that that since my role at the company is kind of to do everything other than brew, I think the fact that I was so busy, like Marquita, at ETHS with swimming and then obviously the regular class load, I had to learn how to prioritize and spend my time wisely. And also, I mean, we all had to learn how to do many different subjects. But I think that ability to kind of hop from one thing to another and not necessarily know what's going to happen each day is something that high school definitely prepared me for, and is one of the things that I love most about this job.
Awesome. Rodney?
Yeah, I'd have to say very similar to Josh and Marquita. I was very involved at ETHS from YAMO, student director and editor, and the Evanstonian, to I also sat as a student rep to the youth commission for the Evanston City Council when I was in high school. So I was really involved. I think from those experiences, I learned how to work with different sorts of groups and populations, which was hugely helpful for general management. And if I had to point to one class was probably public speaking at ETHS. Have to do an awful lot of it in a senior leadership role, and in my situation, cross-culturally. And I think ETHS gave me some really solid grounding.
Amazing. And Rachel?
Sounds like there's a pattern with all the people in the beer industry. We all sound like we were huge nerds. I was also at high school from like 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. doing whatever it was, math team, stage crew, band, jazz band, marching band, et cetera, et cetera. So seems like a theme between all of us. But for me, the thing that I used every day and look back on and think that I was a part of was definitely Chem Phys. So I just like remember my first year of Chem Phys, or my second year of Chem Phys, whatever it was, doing science projects in Doc K's chem lab, and we were mixing different chemicals to create different colored precipitates. And I was like, man, science is cool. And here I am still every day saying, man, science is cool. So I think Chem Phys is really the big one that stuck out for me.
Awesome. And so all of you have a variety of experience in the beer, wine, and spirits industry. And Marquita, I know you were just mentioning your experience at Texsom, which those who are watching in the wine industry, Texsom, T-E-X, so it takes place in Texas, S-O-M, short for sommelier, is a trade event where a lot of wine professionals come together. Marquita is showing off her badge. And it's a 3-day experience of tastings and seminars and just a lot of good energy among wine professionals. And so Marquita, you're in New York. It's notorious for its fine dining scene, for its wine scene. And nowadays we're seeing a lot of wine professionals kind of ditching the traditional route of maybe going via the court or, taking the professional fine dining route to becoming a somm and using avenues like social media to show off their wine knowledge. So for you and your experience, can you share how you have learned about wine and really absorbed wine knowledge over the last decade, and if it's changed at all, and how did you prepare for your presentation at Texom?
Well, it's interesting because I actually talked about all of these things while I was at Texom. I did a presentation on classic Italian reds, which is something that I specialize in my career. I am studying to be an Italian wine scholar, and I've also started the first part of my Master of Wine Studies, which is probably going to take me forever if I ever get it. But I started studying wine when there was no Facebook, social media, when there was barely internet. And so a lot of it was book studying, which of course ETHS prepared me for. I still have my European History AP book, which I actually use for historical context and also for insomnia. But what happened at Texom actually started happening pre-COVID. There were already people starting to move out of the just being on the floor. The original, and I think perhaps traditional role of the sommelier was in fine dining, was to facilitate a very, very broad, very classic traditional list that had all of the first gross, the super seconds, Burgundy for days, all of the champagne houses, all of the Bs, Bubbles, Burgundy, Barbaresco, Barolo, Brunello di Montalcino. Actually, there was a very interesting article written about the fact that we don't need Master Sommelier anymore. And because Master Sommelier have now moved off the floor, that's because the job has broadened to something more than just being in a restaurant. You can be in retail, you can be a writer. For instance, you can go to business school and get your MBA and be a tremendously successful business person. You can just learn by being in the business. You can apprentice with people. But at the end of the day, when you want to be the director of operations, when you want to be the COO, when you be the CFOO, all the letters, all the abbreviations, you must have credentials in order to play in a very, very high level. So that has not changed. But what I'm seeing also, and I think this is part of another question, but it's only half of the question about what was happening before COVID, is that the role is traditionally very chauvinistic. It was geared towards men who are not allowed, but are used to traditionally being out of the house all hours of the day. For women, this is very hard. So it's a traditionally chauvinistic position, because after you are on the floor, and when you're on the floor as a SOM, you're not on the floor from 5:30 until you get to the restaurant or your store at 10 a.m. because you have meetings, you have inventory, you have tastings, you have to prepare your staff, you have to do education. So the job starts at 10 a.m. So the days are very, very long. If you have a family, if you have responsibilities as a woman, it is like having two full-time jobs, which never end. And so what people have discovered when the restaurant industry shut down and they had free time to think about what their career was doing, a lot of people like myself, my restaurant tried. We sold our entire restaurant. We sold the entire wine list, and it was decided that the restaurant would not reopen. And so in August of last year, my 22-year career in wine just kind of burned to the ground. And there was nothing. And I had to build it back in a time when there was not a restaurant, because at that point, no one could hire a full-time SOM just standalone. You could either be the manager and also the SOM, or so you were a SOM manager. And it was in that way to be a SOM, or you could be the captain, be a SOM, or you can be the head bartender and be a SOM, or you could be the GM and be the SOM. Because only fine dining can hire and afford to have just a full-time SOM on the floor. And I think a lot of SOMs also were like, I can see my family. Netflix is awesome. Oh my God, Netflix is so awesome.
No, I think you brought up a number of good points, and I wanted to kind of segue to Rodney, because you brought up leadership, you touched on the pandemic, and Rodney, as the leader of a global brand, one that is a French company, but it makes a Polish product. You spoke to a little bit about having to lead cross-culturally. So I'd love to know, what is that culture like? What has it been like over the last year and some change? And are there any customs you've had to learn, both from the French culture and the Polish culture, that you've had to implement in your leadership when it comes to promoting a global brand like Belvedere?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think, hailing from Evanston and ETHS, was a big boom for me, because I became accustomed to dealing with many cultures. And you guys probably know Chicago has the largest population of Poles outside of Warsaw. So when I first arrived at the distillery, which is about 45 minutes outside of Warsaw and Żołądów, I said to everyone, I'm from Chicago, so I must be a little bit Polish, and no one laughed. And so I waited for the translator to translate, and still no one laughed. And I thought, okay. And what I learned was that the Poles have a very reserved style when they first meet you. They're not going to be overly emotive until they get a sense of you, you have a sense of them, and then they really connect with you warmly and very deeply. And so one has to really appreciate that style. In terms of the French, their approach in terms of interactions, and it cascades into management as well, couldn't be more different. And the great great little parable that I sort of hearken back to is that if an American kid came home with a 95 on a test, the American parent would say, Susie, you aced it, you rocked it, high five. If the French kid came home with the 95, they would say, Suzette, have a seat. We need to talk about these 5 points. What happened? Both parents want the same thing, but they're totally different approaches. And once you understand that it's culturally driven and not personal, it's easy to manage. So, when I first joined Moe and Hennessy 11 years ago, I was on the Hennessy business. And we had a big turnaround. The business was on fire. It's still on fire. And I'd be in Paris reporting, and they'd say, how's the business performing? And I'd say, well, we missed out on this distributor, this promotion underdelivered, and we were a little bit disappointed with, how Minneapolis turned out. But overall, we're doing fine. Back in the US, I'm saying, you're setting a record, go, go, go. You guys are rocking it, keep going, keep going. It's very contextual. And I think, coming from a background like ETHS really prepares you to recognize the context in which you need to operate and cue to the specific cultural milieu in which you find oneself.
That's amazing. And the difference that you brought up about, America, the cultural, it's not, like you said, it's not personal, it's cultural. Like, I remember getting a 95 and being so excited, but hearing that, if I grew up French, that those 5 points would, determine if I got a punishment or not. Like, it's good to know that, having to absorb those things in order to keep moving is a good lesson to learn. And so, Josh, I know that, being a product of Evanston, you brought, the city's first brewery to us. And I'd love to know, Temperance is a part of a huge growing craft beer community here in Chicago. I'd be curious to know what sets Temperance apart from other microbreweries in the city. And is there like a group of you all that kind of comes together and chats and shares lessons learned, or is everybody just kind of doing their own thing? And if so, what are some lessons you've learned from the community that you all are building in the city?
I think as a rule, the craft beer community is pretty darn friendly, collegial to each other. So if we're short on some ingredient, we're part of the Illinois Craft Brewers Guild, so we can send out an email saying, hey, does anybody have, 100 pounds of this malt or whatever we might be needing. Also, we just have, especially like the local breweries that we might want to actually drive to, we'll just text them and say, hey guys, we're a little short with this and that and the other. And we do the same thing. So that's really nice. We also we'll do collaborative beers. So, maybe we'll have, and we take that opportunity not only to build or maintain relationships, but also to kind of learn from other breweries. So if we want to do a certain style that we haven't done before, it's like, well, why don't we, do it with these guys that we know make this style really well. And then we can learn a little bit there, and then we can share our knowledge with the style that they're interested in. So that's one thing that's really nice, although it's sort of, but then we're all fighting for the same sort of cooler space and shelf space and draft lines. So it's supportive, but also, you're still like, hey, we'd love to take that draft line. So, it's like frenemies or, friends in high school who you're also in competition with, something like that. And as for what Temperance is sort of, I think the little niche, well, not niche, but maybe what we're known for, I think is, I hope we're known for making really solid, consistent, high quality beers. So even if it's and we tend toward the more traditional English styles. So if you want to have a great example of an English IPA, you know, try our flagship Gatecrasher, which happened to win the Great American Beer Festival silver for its style in 2014 and gold in 2016. So, you know, we're not the hippest, but we're solid and consistent, and you know that you can always come here or buy a 6-pack off the shelf somewhere and know that you're going to get a great beer. There was another question, I think.
You touched on that. Marquita did have a question, which is a great one. How did you come to name the brewery Temperance?
Yes. So what I say in our whenever I give the brewery tour is that you know, Evanston, as we all know, Evanston was dry until 1972, and the Women's Christian Temperance Union is actually still headquartered here. Since we were one of the reasons is we were the first brewery in Evanston. So we wanted to sort of link ourselves with Evanston's somewhat tortured history with alcohol. You know, it's like hopefully the closed parenthesis on that. And, but also, you know, it's not a thumbing of the nose at Frances Willard, the most influential leader of the WCTU. I say this at every tour, I believe she was unfairly accused or blamed for prohibition. Like, she was long gone before prohibition took effect, and it was really the Anti-Saloon League that got things going, because they were a one-hit wonder. That's all they wanted. Whereas Frances Willard wanted to help with women's suffrage and child labor laws. You know, she was friends with Jane Addams at Hull House. So she was spread too thin to just focus on the one thing. And you know, she wanted temperance. It wasn't prohibition. So, and also she had the greatest personal motto. It was do everything. So we wanted to kind of tie in, and I don't think it's too tenuous to say that, you know, she wanted to make people's lives better, and so do we. We're just doing it with beer. But, you know, we don't have our brewery, you know, it's especially the tap room, like it's not like a party atmosphere. It's really comfortable and casual, and you know, I think everyone feels like it's a unique space in Evanston. But you know, it is. I guess I'm trying to get back to the idea of temperance. You know, we're not going crazy. Our artwork on our cans isn't over the top. So we're trying to do it in a classy kind of way. But yeah, that's a long way around how temperance became our name.
That's awesome. And you mentioning Frances Willard, which I went to Willard Elementary School. And speaking about the women who were really at the forefront of you know, the alcohol and beer industry in our country. I think sometimes when we think about big brands, or even you know, smaller brands, it's usually, you know, the men who came up with the idea, and they're the faces of it. But Rachel, you are like one of few women brewmasters that I know of. And you have a really cool job that brings together your love for science, but you're also creating a really cool product. So I'm curious to know, you know, because beer traditionally is looked at a very like manly drink, but I know a lot of women who drink beer as well. Why do you think it's so important for women to reclaim space in this industry? And as you continue to rise in your career, do you find that there are support systems for women like you to, you know, continue to become the leaders that you are?
Yeah, so obviously I think it's important in any industry for women to reclaim space. I mean, we bring a diverse perspective that is necessary for moving forward. But for us, I don't know how much people have been reading about or not, but there's been a big outcry of women actually speaking out against the harassment and issues that have been going on in the brewing industry right now. It's sort of like our revolution is happening right now. And I think the reason we're doing that is because these issues are very real and they're very toxic. And there's not a woman that I've met in the beer industry that has not experienced some form of harassment, myself included. And that includes, you know, small daily microaggressions to some form of sexual harassment. So I think it's really important for women, one, like just be there and say, we deserve to be here and we're here for a reason and we're not going anywhere. But also because women bring an attention to detail that I don't see and I don't experience in all of my male employees. I see a focus on not just the one task at hand, but the entire picture. They're looking at the safety of their fellow employees, the product, the quality of the product, the consumer's experience. And there's a warmth that I find in female employees, and not all women and not all men, just to be clear. I'm a very cold woman, so I don't have that warmth. But there's just that personal warmth that I see from a lot of female coworkers, and they build those relationships with people, and that's sort of the leverage they build to get stuff done, as opposed to just the hammering way that traditional cis white men have done. And I think that warmth is necessary right now in our industry, and especially in the outcries of everything that women are bringing to light right now. Also, not to mention that beer brewing has historically been women owned. Some of the first documented brewings have been done by women, Sumerian women and Egyptian women. So it is our industry and we're here to take it back. So yeah, the Brave Noise movement is sort of a bunch of collaboration brews going on with a lot of breweries saying, hey, we stand up for women's rights, we stand up for this and that. And that stemmed again out of this revolution that women are standing up and saying, hey, it's not okay. There's lots of resources for women. However, they're not that readily given to you when you're like, hey, I want to join the beer industry. So it's sort of like you have to look for it and you've got to find your spot. So the biggest way that I've found support is just other women in the industry. As you meet people, they end up being there for you and like mentoring you a little bit. And I always want to help women. Women want to help other women. And that's been my best resource. I was lucky when I worked for Josh at Temperance. There were 2 other female brewers that I was able to learn under. I've always had strong women in my career to help lead me and help me through any sort of situations. So looking for those fellow women is super important. And another reason why we need to be in this industry is to help be there for the others that are up and coming. Sort of ended up on a tangent there. I'm sorry, but it is.
No, that's fine.
Chastity, if I could just build on a point, because
Absolutely.
Marquita mentioned that, coming out of the pandemic, we're sort of reinventing the narrative. And it's great because we can really tell a more thorough and comprehensive story. For instance, the Belvedere is part of Moet Hennessy, the MH and LVMH. And one of our champagne brands is Veuve Clicquot, which means the widow Clicquot. It's not Monsieur Clicquot, who died 5 years after the champagne house started, but it was his widow who really grew the business dramatically and created Riedling, which is a way of clarifying the champagne. So she's incredibly innovative, and a lot of people don't realize that story. And even at Belvedere, we don't have one master distiller; we have a group of 4, and they're all women, and have been for quite some time. And I think as we start telling the narrative, more people will see their place broadly in the industry, because we need more leaders like Josh too, who are nurturing young talent coming up like Rachel in the early days.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that, Marquita, you mentioned that there's this kind of like just rebirth that's happening across all 3 sectors of this industry in particular. And I remember last summer being in the wine industry, and I'm sure there were different experiences in spirits and in beer around the time of the murder of George Floyd and Blackout Tuesday. There was this kind of whole online digital, just like, I guess I'm gonna call it like a big bang that happened. And, because our country was experiencing this very heightened awareness about race and diversity and inclusion, I remember just being a wine writer, getting tagged in so many posts and, all these shouts out for, Black professionals who are, making wine, or they have their own vodka, or they're in the beer industry. So, Marquita, I'd be curious to know last summer's this awakening that our country was experiencing, especially in the wine industry, because like many other industries, it's a small but growing population of us that are Black wine professionals. What was your kind of brief response to that? And do you think there's been a lot of change since then, as far as pushing forward diversity, equity, inclusion in the wine industry?
I think there has been tremendous change. And as you have just said, last year, after the death of George Floyd, which sent a shock throughout the world, the big bang in the wine community was Julia Coney. I was on a random Tuesday in June with maybe 1,100 followers on Instagram, watching cat videos and listening to house music. And I got a notice from Julia about the organization that she just started called Black Wine Professionals. And by Thursday, I had 1,500 followers. I knew 400 other BIPOC people who were in the wine industry from all over the world, including New York. And so that was the change that absolutely began what I think was a seismic shift in wine. And because everyone had the time to actually reflect, a lot of things came out of the darkness, came out of that black square. Wine Unify came out of that black square. The Roots Fund came out of that black square. Hughes Society came out of that black square. Also, one of my very dear friends is in France right now, as part of the Becky Wasserman Scholarship, where there are 8 people of color right now in Burgundy visiting all of the chateau with the rocks and the coq au vin and the caviar and the stainless steel eggs. Chateau Dujac, Jeremy Sess, and the House of Dujac sponsored George Walker this summer as part of the Roots Fund initiative. Roots Fund itself, and I will talk about our experience at Hugh Wine and Culture this summer, where what I thought was going to be a very fun experiment in blind tasting became like a cutthroat, scary, sunken place blind tasting final conclusion, of which I'm very proud to say Janine was the winner, and she got a full scholarship to a WSET class. One of the things that sets us back as a community of color is that wine is very, very expensive to study. It is expensive to take the classes, it's expensive to study the wines. It's expensive to buy the wines that you are studying. How can you study Champagne unless you have Georges Laval retail prices money, which is still extremely expensive? How can you do it? And you can't just taste one bottle. You must taste 10 or 15. So it costs thousands of dollars to study wine. And so the Roots Fund is making that possible. Becky Wasserman is making that possible. Hispanics in Wine is making that possible. There are now scholarships with UC Davis, and there is an eye on raising up communities and making sure that they are seen and heard. And that one of the things that happened, I did a Zoom last year with Lydia Richards, shout out to her, 40 Under 40 and the Wine Enthusiast. And just a note about the Wine Enthusiast, the 40 Under 40, it was like a Wakanda reunion up in there with the people of color. And it didn't look like tokenism. It looked like what the future can really be. And also, this is the second time I went to TechSom. I'm happy to report that the women outnumbered the men. And we had Philippe Andre, ETHS as well, of House Charles Heidsieck. he held a seminar for the BIPOC industry. And it was announced all day at every single seminar that we were having this wonderful seminar to celebrate the BIPOC community. And when I walked into the room, it was full of everyone there. It was full of everyone. So this was what our future is, where we are not put in a room, all 4 or 5 of us, but 38 strong, with an equal number of allies in the community, because we cannot do this by ourselves. We for a very long time, you existed in a bubble where you could be hired for diversity, and then you stayed in a diversity lane and there was nowhere to go. Now, the conversation is open.
I would agree. And I think you speak a lot about when we think about looking forward, because I mean, we can learn from lessons of the past, but looking forward and being able to create this monumental change. And writing and doing some research for our conversation, Belvedere is just like really leading the charge in not only how you all distill your vodka, but really, taking some incredible steps forward in when it comes to sustainability and environmental stewardship. And so I'm curious, you all have set this huge goal to be fully organic by 2023. And so from a business perspective, why was this a smart move to make now? And in addition to some of your newer products like organic infusions, what other sustainable innovations can consumers expect from the brand in the near future?
Yeah, sustainability, we found to be really, really galvanizing for our core audiences all over the world. So the bulk of our research was done in 5 markets on 3 continents, and usually there's never consensus. But even pre-pandemic, millennials and older Gen Zers were very concerned about the environment, very concerned about brands being sustainable and taking, the principles around COP26 very seriously. So earlier this year, we brought online a biomass capture facility. So basically, we're able to take the heat and the steam as we're distilling the vodka and convert it into clean energy, as well as burn the after product from the rye. Belvedere is made with rye. So such that we can power the entire distillery using this facility. We're the first to win a green energy grant from the European Commission back in 2018 for our prior work in cutting CO2 emissions. But now with this facility online, not only will we be able to cut all of our emissions, the only thing left are forklifts. We have not figured out how to get green batteries for those crazy forklifts, but we're working on it. And we're in the process now of connecting into the local Tyler Girardov's grid to provide them with clean energy, because we distill about 7 to 8 months out of the year. So when we're not distilling, we can send that energy into the town itself, which is currently burning coal for electricity. Now, easier said than done. There are a lot of very strong coal interests, from a business standpoint. So it's a process in terms of bringing everybody together in the broader community around these shared values and benefits of sustainability. Going forward, we see a big opportunity in terms of our water usage. We have our own artisanal wells. We have a plan to cut our usage of water by 40% by the end of 2024, which will allow us to draw 27% less water from the wells themselves. And we're making all of Belvedere is natural right now, meaning that it's just water and rye and the distillation process. Because in Poland, vodka making is appellated in a way that France or Italy or US may appellate wine, such that we can have no additives, no added sugar, no emulsifiers. It has to be non-GMO, and it has to be sourced strictly from Poland to be Polish vodka. And that's not true for our competitors. It's perfectly legal for them to add some things. And I have to say, all vodka is gluten-free. All distilled spirits are gluten-free. So do not let someone tell you their brand is better because it's gluten-free, because that's manipulative. So anyway, so yes, sustainability we really believe is here to stay. You know, Marquita was asking about becoming a B Corp, which is sort of an American construct, and we're incorporated in Poland. So we'll have to do it the Polish way, but we already have a big head start in that, you know, we're already all natural. We only source from 8 farming sources. So we've known them for years. We have 100% traceability of all of our rye. And it's how we're able now to move these guys into the organic sphere. For 16 years, we've been conducting a summit called the Raw Spirit Summit with the Technical University of Łódź in Poland, where we bring academicians and farmers with technologists together to talk about the latest agricultural strategies in terms of regenerative agriculture and sustainability. So those sorts of commitments have really helped us transform the business, and we expect to keep doing it going forward.
Absolutely. And bringing up technology, Rachel and Josh, I'd love for you all to speak on, in beer, the technologies you all use to be innovative. Josh, I know at Timbrent you all have, I think, 15 or 16 different types of beers on draft are available for consumers to try. So I'd love for Josh to speak to you know, Temperance and what technologies you all use and how are you all thinking for the future when it comes to your beer making. And then Rachel, if you could touch on also the technology and science behind your work as a brewmaster and what you're looking to implement, you know, moving forward in this new merger that you're working on as well.
Well, we definitely use technology, not nearly to the extent that Rachel does, but we have to focus our resources and efforts on quality control and quality assurance. So, you know, we'll measure fermentation still kind of the old way for the most part. Well, you know, taking readings with, you know, with displacement basically. And then, but at the end, once everything's said and done, we do have a device, an alkalizer that will give us the exact alcohol by volume. Also, we have a DO or dissolved oxygen meter that we can take readings throughout the process. Oxygen is great in the beginning when we got to get the yeast going, but then right after that, it's zero oxygen. It's the enemy of basically shelf life. Also, you know, the beer drinkers experience, especially of the hoppier beers. And our latest purchase we're very excited about is, I think it's called a CO box. It's basically a little box that one of the hardest things to measure was our level of carbonation in the finished product, because it was this really ungainly thing that you would fill and you'd have to shake first until you got it to a certain level, and then you had to go to a chart. It didn't even like read out on it, on the face of it. You had to, and so it's like, I'm kind of in between this number and this number, and I'm probably about this degree, and it was a mess. So now, and then we have a new canning line too, which is very finicky when it comes to carbonation levels. So if we're just, you know, 0.03 above what it needs, it'll just, we'll get what are known as low fills. So the can will be, you know, maybe a half ounce too small. And that's sort of our last, or too low. And then it gets booted. That's another piece of equipment that we've had for years, but, you know, you have to have a certain, the U.S. Tax and Trade Bureau, that's they govern the taxing of spirits and alcohol in this country. And we have to get labels approved for them and everything, but also they come up with the requirements for what a 6-pack of 12-ounce beer must weigh. So we have a device now that shoots a little X-ray through, and depending on the density, it knows whether or not there is liquid at the spot where we need liquid to be in a can. And if it's not there, boop, it shoots it off the line. So we had too many of those if the carbonation level was too high, and that's just lost product. We used to, before we got that piece of machinery, we had to weigh every individual can on a scale. Ooh, somebody was just doing this the whole time, take it. And I had to do that sometimes too, obviously. And so I was very incentivized to get a piece of equipment that replaced me on the line. So, but yeah, so basically we made those decisions based on our capital resources and what do we get the biggest bang for the buck in terms of the quality and efficiency during the process.
Great. And I know, Rachel, you know, as I mentioned, being the brewmaster, how does technology for you enforce innovation? And what are some new things that you're working on with this new merger that you're looking forward to sharing with consumers?
So science and technology I use every single day. They're easily my two best friends and right-hand men and women while I work. The whole process of making beer and malt-based products is science. Obviously, the mashing process is when you're breaking down large starches to smaller fermentables using different enzymes. And then it moves into the fermenter where you've got now yeast coming into play and turning those sugars into CO2 and alcohol. And there's just obviously way more science than that. But even just for that, essentially for me, science is the thing that tells me what I need, and technology is how I end up controlling it. So science will tell me, hey, you need your temperature at this range during this period of time for the brewing process. And then my temperature probe and the program I've got associated with it is how I maintain that temperature. So whether I've got off like high temperature set points and low temperature set points, where if it starts creeping up too high, it'll shut off the boiler. And if it starts going too low, it'll turn it back on so that it maintains that main set point that's needed for your enzyme to be happy. And then of course you want it to hit a high enough temperature to denature that enzyme so it doesn't stay happy and keep doing stuff in your brewing process that you don't want it to do. So that's just one example, but there's a ton of those across the process. So for pitching yeast, for example, depending on how much sugar and how much malt you've used, you need a certain amount of yeast. You need that yeast to be alive. So they've got this piece of machinery called an abermeter, and it's basically two plates, one negative, one positive, and it'll, you know, put an electric field there, which will end up measuring your exact cell count, the viability of it, and it'll measure in based on that how much yeast you need so that you're never over pitching or under pitching. Obviously, over or under pitching will cause different off flavors from the beer. It'll make the yeast perform differently, which you need your yeast to be perfect and happy in order to make your beer consistent and tasty. So flow meters, DO probes, temperature probes, Anton pars, so that's where you're measuring your alcohol, like Josh was saying, your sugar content, this and that. So there's a lot of technology that's used in the beer process, and it's wonderful. And in designing this new brewery, as much technology and programming I can put in to make the process as easy as possible for the brewers that are physically doing it, as well as safe as possible. You've got a lot of technology involved, like emergency stops that can be used if you've got a lot of dangerous equipment in the brewing industry. So having feedback channels that say, hey, this is getting too hot, I need to stop for the safety of the operator, or this is getting too fast, or this is gonna, whatever it ends up being. And I don't want to get into too many details, but there's a lot of way you can use technology to make the job safer, easier, and create more quality product faster and more consistently. And so I do.
Awesome. That's wonderful. In our last few minutes, I would just love everyone to go around 30 seconds and share what would a current student or recent grad need to do as they head into life after high school to prepare for career in the beverage industry. So Rodney, I'll have you start, and then I'll just kind of point out everyone 30 seconds or less.
Okay, I would just say, be prepared. And be prepared means doing a thorough job in everything that you take on. If someone had told me at ETHS that I'd be in the spirits industry, I probably would have laughed. I thought I was going to law school. But I started out at Procter & Gamble, then worked at Johnson & Johnson. I did the launch of OnStar for General Motors, came out to California for a .com that turned into a .bomb, but ended up getting hired into Robert Mondavi because I had this marketing background and finance. And so you never know what doors open, and being prepared as thoroughly as you possibly can will serve you. And you don't have to know by graduation where you hope to end up in your career.
That's great. Josh?
Yes, as a father of a recent graduate of high school who's now a first year in college and stresses out about what class she's going to take next semester and what job that's going to lead to, I'm like, no. I mean, I graduated with an English degree and then got a master's in architecture, and now I run a brewery. So it goes back to what Rodney's saying: be prepared, also be open, be curious. You never know who you're going to talk to that's going to lead you to your next job. And also, we don't even know what kind of jobs are going to be. New jobs will be around in a few years. And the great thing about this industry that we're all in is there's so many different jobs within that industry, whether it's sales, journalism, production, marketing, finance, HR. If there's a lot of creativity, a lot of options, and I think if the more you hold things loosely as you're moving through high school, take classes that really interest you, and if you go to college after, same thing. Find the teachers, professors, classes that are really great and really interest you, and just do things that I think you're going to find fulfillment in, because you're going to get the most out of those.
Amazing. Rachel?
Being open is going to be the most important for sure. I mean, as an 18-year-old, I don't think any of us presume we're going to go into the alcohol industry. So when I went to UC Davis, I didn't even know it was a beer or wine school. I just happened to be looking for free electives, and I saw an intro to beer and brewing, and who wouldn't want to take that when you're in college? So being open to those and like taking that curveball and running with it and ending up, in biochemistry and food science instead of being a biochemical engineer, it's totally okay. And it's probably going to happen to more of you than you think. So just ride that openness and that flexibility. And then throughout any career in the brewing or spirits or wine industry, flexibility is going to be crucial. It's an ever-changing, ever-growing industry, and being able to be on top of it and willing to change your direction to provide what the consumers need is also very crucial. I mean, the seltzer boom that happened, 3 years ago now, is still going crazy. But if breweries just stayed and didn't make that change, then they're not going to grow with the industry. The consumers are always changing. So yeah, just be open, be flexible, and definitely try and learn as much as you can in as many different fields as you can, because I use engineering, math, programming, interior design, beer science, etc. every day in my career. And you never know what you're going to need.
And last but not least, Marquita.
I'm going to say this from this perspective. When I graduated from ETHS, I went to University of Chicago. I majored in political science and public policy because I was going to law school and I was going to change the world. I took a very deep detour from law school, decided to dance professionally, which I did for 12 years, which is why I'm in the wine industry. I waited tables the entire 12 years. And it was a job at Let Us Entertain You in the fine dining Italian division, which is the reason I'm sitting here talking to you about the wine streets right now. You must have a strong foundation of knowledge. So my thing is education. If it interests you now, start reading about Burgundy, start reading about Champagne. So when you eventually turn 21 and can start tasting, you are already in the Olympics of the industry. You already know what all 9 grand cru of the Côte Nuit are, and you know how to pronounce them because you've already taken French, and you don't have to like Google things at 3 o'clock in the morning and depend on bar for row because you already did it your sophomore year in high school. You took 4 years of high school French or Spanish. You took the AP test, you got a 4 or 5. You didn't have to take the first year in college, but take it in college. And then also, I had no idea when I was in high school. I had a plan for myself. The plan blew up in college. And the plan blew up 5 years after I graduated from college. And then the plan blew up again. And then the plan blew up again last year in 2020. But an ETHS education does everything for you. It's actually Francis Willard's motto of life is the ETHS, is the orange and blue, do everything.
No, that was awesome. I thank you all so much for taking the time to share your insight, being leaders and trailblazers in this industry. It's amazing for me just to be able to have access to each of you all. And I am so grateful again to just have this opportunity to share with our alumni community the amazing work that you're doing. And I hope that each of you have an amazing holiday season. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you all again next time.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Another coming together is in the books. That was a great talk and a great experience listening to people talk about their work in the beverage industry and the spirits industry. We, at this time of year, also are raising money to support ETHS through the ETHS Foundation. Be sure to take a look at supporteths.org and find out the ways you can help us. Giving Tuesday is around the corner, and we think there's an opportunity to help us there. Please join us in our next couple of episodes. We have some very interesting topics planned, and we'll get more to you as we get closer to the dates for those episodes. In the meantime, have a wonderful holiday season, and we hope you get into the holiday spirit. Thank you.